Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. I want to begin tonight with a very unusual prophecy that I last discussed a couple of years ago. I believe it has much more relevance today in the light of the growing economic problems besieging the European Union. It's called the Prophecy of the Popes and is a Vatican document that is credited to St. Malachy. He was the 12th century Bishop of Armad in what is now Northern Ireland. Now let me be clear from the start that I am not saying that this man's prophecy rises to the same level of detail and accuracy as those in the Bible. However, it does contain some remarkable predictions that seem to have been fulfilled across the centuries and may bear relevance for today. According to the traditional account, in 1139, Malachy was summoned to Rome by Pope Innocent II. While in Rome, Malachy purportedly experienced a vision of future popes, which he recorded as a sequence of cryptic phrases. This manuscript was then deposited in the Roman archive and forgotten about until it was rediscovered in 1590. The list is said to name every pope from Malachy's time to the very last pope, which he called Peter the Roman. This is Malachy's prophecy regarding Peter, translated from the Latin. Peter the Roman, who will nourish the sheep in many tribulations, when they are finished, the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. According to Malachy's description, Peter the Roman will be the pope who will work with the Antichrist. Revelation chapter 17, verse 16, predicts that the Antichrist and the 10-nation confederacy out of the old Roman Empire will eventually turn upon the false religious system and its leader and utterly destroy it, just as Malachy predicted. I again want to stress that the prophecy of the popes was delivered by a Roman Catholic bishop and has been maintained in the Vatican's archives since its rediscovery in at least 1590. It was certainly not concocted by some anti-Catholic Protestant. Some Catholic encyclopedia claim that it's a forgery. But if it were a forgery, why has it been housed and guarded in the Vatican archives? And most importantly, it cannot be dated any later than 1590. So if this prophecy is a forgery, it still has remarkable predictions about our present times that are over 400 years old. For example, Pope number 263 was Pope John the 23rd, whom Malachy described as a shepherd and sailor. His real name was Angelo Roncalli, and he was the son of sharecroppers and shepherds. Before being elected Pope, Cardinal Roncalli was named Patriarch of Venice, the famed canal city and seaport. Malachy described Pope 264, Pope Paul VI, as the flower of flowers. The coat of arms of the Montini family, from which he came, featured 3 flowers. Pope number 265 was Pope John Paul I. Malachy described his pontificate as the midst of the moon. On the day of John Paul I's election, the moon was half full. Albino Luciani, or John Paul I, died 1 month later under another half moon. Pope John Paul II was Pope number 266. He was identified by Malachy as being from the labor of the sun. Karol Wojtyła was born on the day of a solar eclipse. Pope number 267 is the current pontiff, Pope Benedict XVI. Before John Paul II died, I looked up what Malachy had to say about his successor, the 267th Pope. Malachy linked this Pope to the glory of the olive. One of the nicknames of the Benedictine order is that of the Olivetans. So when Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger chose as his papal name Pope Benedict, it was startling. This order links itself to a love of the olive. The next pope will be Pope number 268. According to St. Malachy, this pope will be Peter the Roman, the last pope. Peter the Roman will reign, according to Malachy's prophecies, during the horrific time of tribulation that immediately precedes the second coming of Christ. How far off might the fulfillment of Malachy's prophecy be? Well, the current Pope, Benedict XVI, will be 85 years old come April. According to the Bible, in the last days, a single global authority will emerge from somewhere within the area of the old Roman Empire. It will take control by acclamation, setting up a global government in partnership with a global religious authority. Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 identifies the political beast as rising up out of the sea and having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, I might add here that when something rises up out of the sea is used symbolically as the mass of Gentile nations. Upon the horns are 10 crowns, indicating 10 kings or kingdoms. Revelation 13, verse 2 describes the political beast as a composite of the 4 beasts that came before. It says, now, the beast which I saw was like a leopard, which was the symbol of Greece. His feet were like the feet of a bear, which was the symbol of Persia, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion, which was a symbol of Babylon. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. And in chapter 12 of Revelation, the dragon is identified as Satan. Daniel chapter 7, verse 7 foretells the rise of these great beasts, a lion, a bear, a leopard. And after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. The beasts of Daniel's visions were the 4 world empires that would rule the earth: Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. The Roman Empire was the most powerful of the 4, and the only one that was not actually conquered and replaced by another political empire. When the political Roman Empire collapsed from within, it continued in a religious form under the popes, and it was called the Holy Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, symbolized by the 4th beast, the one more dreadful than the first 3 empires combined, finally collapsed from its own internal corruption in AD 461. It remained dead as a political system until the first inkling of a revival took place with the 1948 Benelux Treaty that led to the 1957 Treaty of Rome. That treaty led to the European Community, which led to the unification of Europe, which is today on the verge of a monetary collapse. According to Alan Greenspan, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve System, the European Union is just too big to succeed. In a recent interview with CNBC, Greenspan warned the European Union is doomed to fail because the divide between the northern and southern countries is just too great. The problem is that they're too far apart culturally and economically to hold together. Again, quoting Greenspan, the effect of the divergent cultures in the Eurozone has been grossly underestimated. He added, the only way to have several currencies from divergent nations lumped together is if they are culturally close, such as Germany, the Netherlands, and Austria. If they aren't, it simply can't continue to work. Recall that both Daniel and John are adamant in their count. 10 kingdoms with 7 heads. The 10 toes of Daniel's prophecy are the 10 kingdoms that arise out of the ruins of the old Roman Empire. Listen to Daniel chapter 7, verses 23 and 24, and his description of this. He says, "Thus he said, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and it will devour the whole earth and trot it down and crush it. And as for the 10 horns," now listen to this, "as for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom," what kingdom? The Roman Empire phase 1. "Out of this kingdom, 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them. He will be different from the previous ones and will subdue 3 kings." So this tells us a number of things. First of all, the revived Roman Empire has to come directly out of the old Roman Empire. Number one. Number two, it tells us that the 10 kings will be the formation of the beginning of the final world empire. And these 10 kings will rise out of the ruins first. So the 10 kings will become a power before the other beast comes up, and that's the Antichrist. So the Antichrist comes up after there already exists the 10 nations that are going to be the base of political power that will help him come to world power. I'll be back right after this. You know, folks, as I prepared for this week's program, I was struck by the speed with which events are falling into place precisely as the prophets predicted for the end times. I believe we're there. People on the street are talking about what all these things mean. People who wouldn't darken the door of a church or pick up a Bible are now very curious. This is a time that my ministry can have its greatest impact. The message that God has given me is more important now than it's ever been. That's why I'm asking you to help me expand our outreach as new opportunities arise. But I need your help to do this, and time is running out. Please help us reach more people around the world. Send your tax-deductible gifts to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470-470, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74147. You can also visit hallindsey.com. Our phone toll-free, 1-888-RAPTURE. And thanks for being a vital part of my team. 2 weeks ago, the Vatican seemed to weigh in on one of the traditional hallmark signs of the last days of this age. It issued a call for the establishment of a global authority and a central world bank to rule over the world's diverse financial institutions like banks, investment houses, and mortgage companies. The 16-page document released by the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace is titled "Towards Reforming the International Financial Monetary System in the Context of a Global Public Authority." Now that's a title for you. Though it does not directly speak for the Pope, it carries his authority because it quotes him extensively. It is at times very specific. For example, it calls for a certain taxation measure on financial transactions. But the proposal also calls for a new world economic order based on ethics and the achievement of a universal common good. This call follows Pope Benedict's 2009 encyclical, Caritas in Veritate, that denounced a capitalist mentality as responsible for the global financial meltdown. That document, in which the Pope is speaking directly to the world, says the reality of globalization necessitates a gradual balanced transfer of a part of each nation's powers to a world authority and to regional authorities. The Vatican apparently wants to see this global authority playing a role in everything from financial regulation to arms control and disarmament food, peace efforts, and security. The Pope's 2009 encyclical argued that there is an urgent need for a true world political authority. This most recent Vatican document continued to hammer the values of the financial world. The crisis has revealed behaviors like selfishness, collective greed, and the hoarding of goods on a great scale. It said that at fault is an economic liberalism that spurns rules and controls. This isn't a new Vatican proposal, by the way. As the latest publication suggests, the Vatican has been citing for the last 4 decades the need for a global authority that looks beyond individual national interests. It also says that advocating a fair redistribution of wealth should be a moral imperative for Catholics, and suggested that the reform process begin with the United Nations. Now let's connect the dots to see what the bigger picture is starting to look like. First, we have Pope Benedict, possibly the next to the last head of the Church of Rome, calling for the development of a global economic and political authority based on Marxist income redistribution principles. At the same moment in time, the 27-member European Union is facing economic collapse, one that Alan Greenspan says will be caused by its unwieldy size and cultural incompatibility. What will come out of that collapse? According to Greenspan, a leaner, meaner, and smaller grouping of like-minded nations. Is it possible that a reorganized EU will ultimately settle on 10 as the ideal number? The Bible says that the world will soon be governed by a single global political authority in partnership with a global religious authority. Between them, they will have such minute control of individual economic activity that they will be able to exclude individuals from buying or selling unless they become a part of a global political, religious, and economic system under the authority of the Antichrist. This will be accomplished by giving everyone a personal number whose pre-authenticating number or prefix will be 666. Now, we've all heard that thrown around. But in order to get this number, and for it to mean anything, each person will have to swear allegiance to the Antichrist. Then in the meantime, every major political or economic event or proposal of our day points in precisely that same direction as the Bible prophesies. A global economic and political collapse followed by a new world order and the introduction of a great leader who will appear to be the answer to all our problems and dreams, all centrally located in none other than Rome. Is this just an amazing coincidence? Well, not if you know Bible prophecy. More than any time in history, the preparations for the Antichrist's unveiling are occurring before our very eyes. Meanwhile, as if by an invisible hand, the world keeps moving irresistibly toward a one-world government and a one-world economic system. Brothers and sisters, get ready to blast off and meet the Lord in the air. I'm happy to announce the release of the newly revised version of my book, The Everlasting Hatred, The Roots of Jihad. It's being published by WorldNet Daily. And this has been so intensively researched and rewritten that this is something you can't miss. You've got to get this in order to understand what's really going on today. You can get this book right now by simply going to everlastinghatred.com. It all seems so long ago, but it's only been about 10 months since a Tunisian street vendor doused himself with gasoline to protest his treatment by a Tunisian policewoman. When he set himself ablaze, Mohamed Bouazizi started a fire that swept the entire region. 3 governments were completely toppled by the uprisings. The first of these, Tunisia, where it all began less than a year ago, recently held the first free election in its history. According to the Washington Post, European observers declared the vote to be one of the freest they had ever seen. Turnout was estimated at 90% as voters waited in long lines to choose the kind of government they wanted. The Tunisians chose to be led by the Islamist Ennahda party. Of course, it's already fashionable to refer to Ennahda as the moderate Islamist party. That's what all the Western media call them. But with the moderates like these, who needs radicals? Ennahda supported the Iranian student takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran in 1979. It also publicly called for attacks on the United States during the Gulf War. Though some claim that Ennahda is moderate, it's closely aligned with none other than the Muslim Brotherhood and favors the imposition of Sharia law in Tunisia. Prior to the election, the party's leader, Rachid Ghannouchi, announced that if his group won Tunisia's election, it would impose what he called moderate Sharia law. That's probably how the word moderate even got involved here. And of course, the left and the mainstream media, with its high standards of journalistic integrity and fairness, jumped right on it. On Thursday, October 20, Muammar Gaddafi was captured by Libyan rebels while trying to escape his last stronghold in his hometown of Sirte. After being taunted, beaten, and brutalized, he was killed by a gunshot to the head. His body was then laid out on a mattress in a supermarket freezer, and Libyans lined up for days to pass by the body and see the dead dictator for themselves. President Obama used the occasion to assure us of what he expected to happen in Libya.
The Libyan people now have a great responsibility to build an inclusive and tolerant and democratic Libya that stands as the ultimate rebuke to Gaddafi's dictatorship. And now we will be a partner as you forge a future that provides dignity, freedom, and opportunity.
3 days later, on a Sunday, October 23rd, Mustafa Abdul Jalil, Libya's transitional leader, declared his country's liberation. In what appeared to be a direct contradiction of the hopes and wishes expressed by the American president, Abdul Jalil promised that Libya would move toward becoming an Islamic state. According to the Associated Press, Abdul Jalil laid out a vision of a new Libya with an Islamist tint, saying Islamic Sharia law would be the basic source of legislation and existing laws that contradict the teaching of Islam would be nullified. He outlined several changes to align with Islamic law, including putting caps on interest for bank loans and lifting restrictions on the number of wives Libyan men can take. The Muslim holy book, the Quran, allows men up to 4 wives. Well, what could Obama do in the light of this? Still preferring to look on the bright side, President Obama issued another statement congratulating the Libyans on the declaration. After 4 decades of brutal dictatorship and 8 months of deadly conflict, the Libyan people can now celebrate their freedom and the beginning of a new era of promise. Well, it's true that there have been 4 decades of brutal dictatorship and international terrorism. And it's true that the Libyan people can, at least for now, celebrate a newfound freedom. But the new era of promise may be something the West lives to regret, if history is any lesson in this area. For decades, Turkey was on the wrong side of the Bible's outline for the last days. As a NATO member and strong U.S. and EU ally, Turkey was the only majority Muslim state to have treaties and ties with Israel. But God said Turkey would side against Israel. Until this year, that seemed unlikely to the point of impossibility. But since the Mavi Marmara incident last year, when Israel stopped a Turkish ship from running its blockade of Gaza, Turkey has virtually cut all ties with Israel and has been actively trying to provoke an international crisis. Egypt signed a peace treaty with Israel in 1979 that was expected to open floodgates of cooperation between Israel and the Arab world. But God said that Egypt would side against Israel in the last days. While President Hosni Mubarak managed to keep the peace with Israel for more than 30 years, he did so by suppressing the Muslim Brotherhood. When he was deposed last February after the U.S. abandoned him, the Muslim Brotherhood seized the moment. It is now expected to sweep Egypt's election next month, turning Egypt into another Islamic republic ruled under Sharia law. Like Libya, or Tunisia, or Sudan, or Saudi Arabia. In other words, like the band of nations that lie across northern Africa and down the Arabian Peninsula. All of them south of Israel. I've discussed the King of the South before on this program. When last I did so, it was a future development. Today, it is a reality. I believe the King of the South, referred to in Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 through 45, is one of the four spheres of power involved in the War of Armageddon. It will be the Islamic nations that lie south of Israel. In just the last 10 months, what seems so far off in the future has become now a geopolitical reality. All of this just goes to show you that prophecy is being fulfilled daily before our eyes, and that what the Bible says is true. As a watchman on the wall, I try to show you how accurate the Bible's prophecies are. Prophecies given thousands of years ago. And if they're true, that means you can believe everything the Bible says. And it says that Jesus is coming soon to receive all true believers unto himself. Get ready for that day by accepting the gift of pardon that Jesus died to purchase for you. Trust me, you will never, ever regret it. Well, folks, that's it for tonight. I hope a lot of you are still thinking about what I said last week about Gideon's 300. Don't forget, seek to become one of those. You're needed in this time. Well, God bless you, folks. And God willing, I'll see you next week.
You've been watching the Hal Lindsey Report. To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470-470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. You can also support this ministry online. Visit hallindsey.com or call 1-888-RAPTURE.